All right, we're live. Welcome to the Global Phys Ed Voxcast. I'm really excited to be talking to Dr. Doug Gleddie. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on the Voxcast.
Yeah, I've been following your work. I've been following all the stuff that you do with Meaningful PE, and I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing work that you guys are doing. So it's really a privilege to be talking to you about some of the work that you're doing, some of the research you're doing, and how we can get this message out to the physical education teachers and into schools. Because again, I think it's such an important message to have meaningful experiences in PE. So I was reading your bio. I was looking at some of the stuff from your university bio, and it was talking about how one of the things that really stuck out to me and it was interesting to me was talking about how you stay fit and how you stay active. And one of the things that said, you're active with your family, which is really cool. But then the thing that stuck out to me was that you enjoy doing backflips. Can you talk about that a little bit? What's up with the backflips?
Well, I enjoy trying to do backflips, and I haven't been able to complete one yet. I did learn how to front flip on the trampoline without going off the trampoline, which is an important thing. And when my kids were in gymnastics, we used to go to the open gym, and I would be the only parent that was out running around and doing on the trampolines and the tumble track, and so I told their coach, I'm like, okay, my kids are going to run around, but you're going to help me learn how to do some of this stuff. Cause I'm not really a traditional gymnastics build at like 6'5" and 245. So
are you 6'5"? Wow.
Yeah. But it's fun to, it's just fun to try those new things. And I don't think I will at this point in my life anymore. I'm not sure I'm going to master a backflip, but it's fun to try.
Yeah, keep trying. You never know, right? One of these days, it might just all click, come together.
Well, it is all. I can do it off a diving board. But it's all in your head. That's where it is. But
yeah, and it's funny because I used to be a high jumper at the University of Houston,
okay.
and we would do backflips on the mat, and we'd be having fun on the mat and doing all kinds of silly stuff, and it was safe because you had this big, huge cushion. And now I couldn't even imagine trying or attempting anything like a backflip or even jumping over a bar, because I'm actually coaching track now, and I'm helping some high jumpers. And I look at the bar, and it might be 5 feet, 5 feet 2 inches high, and
Yeah.
it's intimidating to me. So like now, even though I used to jump, my best was 6 feet 10 inches. But even though I used to jump at these higher heights, 10 inches above my head, I look at a bar that's like 5'2", and it freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, like that familiarity with things, and I remember the same thing when I was coaching track and gym. I was never a high jump. I mean, I competed in high jump in high school, but I never went any further than that. But then going back to teach like 10 years later. And starting with that bar, it's like, oh yeah, I used to be. I don't even know what I could clear. Certainly not 6'10", but I'm going out there and it's maybe at 5 feet, and I'm going, I don't know that. Like that bar is like a wall.
yeah, it's really crazy because like you said, you lose that familiarity. So I wanted to ask you. I always like to get a little background on our guests. How did you get into education?
I took the long route. Like I was never someone that really super enjoyed school, and it sounds a little cliche, but my favorite class is phys ed and recess, but it really was like, that's what I liked school for, was the social part and being able to play sports with friends at lunchtime and recess. We used to have to finish our lunch before we could go outside for noontime recess. But the older kids would always steal the best baseball diamond. So one of my buddies, he could take a whole double-decker peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and he could cram the whole thing in his mouth. And then he would sit there, and when the teacher asked, are you done? He'd go, mm-hmm. And then he could go out and get the diamond while the rest of us finished up. So it wasn't something that I aspired to early. I went and did an undergrad degree, and I double majored in history and physical education. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I'd be a cop. And so I went and did some of that. I didn't. I just went and through some of the application process, but didn't make it very far. And then I ended up actually teaching. I got offered an opportunity to teach in South America for a year at basically a school on a it was a group called the Wycliffe Translators. So they would help indigenous tribes who didn't have a written language, and they would sit with them for years and figure out the language and do that. And so I worked with their kids.
What country was that?
It was in Peru. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I really enjoyed that, and that kind of solidified, that I wanted to teach. And so I came back and I worked on my dad's farm for a year, and then I went back and got my B.Ed at the University of Lethbridge, which is in Southern Alberta here. And yeah, it was a great program, great experience, really enjoyed it. And I did a double major again in social studies and phys ed. And then I started teaching right after that. And I kind of debated. I thought maybe I wanted to be a farmer for a bit because that's my background. And I tried teaching and farming at the same time for a couple of years. That was a bad idea. And I just discovered that, teaching was more where my passions were.
So what was it about phys ed that really caught your attention? Like, I know you said you always enjoyed moving and you always enjoyed playing sport, but what was it about the physical education experience that really caught your attention?
Yeah, I think for me, and not again to get to this too quick even, but that idea of finding meaning and finding joy in movement. I really go back to growing up on the farm where I had a half section as my playground, and, from a pretty young age was able to go everywhere, as long as you told someone where you were going, and so you could just get lost anywhere. And that idea of just free movement and the idea of autonomy and having choice. So I really enjoyed that piece. I've always enjoyed just movement, whatever it is, and challenging and trying new stuff. And then I think, like, I always had younger cousins that I would have to look after sometimes too. And I just found, like, I was good with them. I enjoyed playing with them. I enjoyed playing games with them, teaching them how to do stuff. And so I think some of that just kind of comes through and it connects with that. Like, I do like teaching, and I like teaching in the classroom. I taught almost every subject there is. But I like that part too, but I like it better when it has movement. And I like that the engagement and the relationships that you can connect with people in phys ed, that's what does it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about you had this childhood where you kind of had free range. You could do whatever you wanted. And I remember growing up, sort of the same way where, we had to be back when the lights came on type of thing. So yeah. we were encouraged to go outside. And I grew up, and when I grew up in South Texas, we didn't have, a lot of money, a lot of resources. So what we did was we went out and played. We found these little adventures in our neighborhood and outside of our neighborhood. And yeah, sure, we would get in trouble and we'd, get scraped up and bumped up every now and then. But we had these opportunities to go out and play for long periods of time, unsupervised.
Yeah.
And it seems like more and more we're losing that, especially in the United States. I mean, I've only been in Saudi Arabia for about 7 months now, but, I lived my whole life in the U.S. And it seems that more and more our children are losing those opportunities to go out and make these small mistakes and learn from these small mistakes. How do we address that?
Yeah, that's a huge question, Jorge, because it's interesting what you just described and what I talked about growing up on the farm is really, like, you can pick out the features of meaningful phys ed that Steph Benny and Tim Fletcher and Deirdre Cronin have come to put together. You can find all those in what you just described, like the autonomy, the social interaction, the challenge, the fun, the developing motor competence, because you learn from slightly older peers.
Yeah.
And it's relevant because you choose what you want to do. If you don't feel like playing soccer that day, you don't play soccer.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm seeing now, and my wife is, she was an elementary teacher for a while. Now she's teaching junior high. And what we discovered just with her class is that, and she was teaching in a pretty well-off neighborhood. So lots of doctor, lawyer, university professor kids and stuff. And I don't think these kids have ever done any form of physical activity without adult supervision.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever have. They don't know how to referee themselves. Right? They don't know how to do that. So part of, I think, how we're going to have to get back to some of that and is in physical education. That has to be part of what we teach. How do you become self-sufficient? How do you become a mover? How can you direct that? Because they may not be able to direct it when they're kids because their parents are maybe over-controlling or protective, or as a society we're like that. But if we can teach them some of that self-direction and autonomy in phys ed, I think they have a shot moving forward at figuring that out as adults and hopefully figuring that out for their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I see, I don't know. I want to say this as diplomatically as possible, right? I don't want to, ruffle any feathers out there, but I see these, and I know we talked about social media before we got started here, but I see these tweets that are being put out. I see these posts that are being posted, and they're being posted as quality physical education. And it looks like you said, that there's a teacher leading a bunch of people doing one particular thing, and there is no autonomy there. There is no student choice. There is no differentiation. It's the teacher leading the activity and everybody following.
Yeah.
And you teach teachers. So how do you send that message to them about autonomy, about student choice, about differentiation? How do you get them to buy in, especially if they didn't have that experience growing up?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for me, it's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to figure out how to connect. And when I mostly teach elementary generalists. And so they get one phys ed course with me. And that might be the only exposure they have to phys ed other than their own phys ed experience. So one of the things that my colleagues and I do is we try and connect to personal experience. And we usually, we do a form of autobiographical narrative inquiry with our students. And so the short version is we have them think of some key, just a memory, almost the first memory that pops into their mind about movement, physical activity, or phys ed. And we keep it pretty general. And we tend to get a mix of positive and negative. Like some people are like, first memory that popped in my mind was getting beamed in the face with a red rubber dodgeball.
Yeah.
Right? And I effing hated phys ed after that forever.
Yeah.
The thing is, we can learn from that too.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we use a bit of a Deweyan framework from John Dewey, one of the kind of founders of he's a very prominent educational theorist, but he has a big theory of experience. And part of that is that we can have educative experiences and we have miseducative experiences. And an educative experience we want more of. A miseducative, it's like, hell no, I don't want to do that ever again.
Yeah.
But if we reflect on those pieces, so that's why we encourage the student teachers to think about, just look in our classroom of 30 pre-service teachers, look at the diversity of experience, positive, negative, educative, miseducative, and all maps in between. Your class is going to be the same.
Yeah.
So when people can connect and realize that, Jorge, your experience is different than mine, and that's different than Sue Ellen down the street, and we can realize then, I think, a little bit more. So there's two pieces. There's realizing the diversity in our classes and that everyone comes to movement and phys ed in a different way. The other piece, though, is when we talk about then, what do you do now that, so I might play a game with them that is just it's really fun. It's engaging. It's really fun. And I'll just ask them afterwards, why did you enjoy this? Everyone was happy and laughing, but why? And invariably, I see those features of meaningful phys ed emerge. And so when we can talk to those features and the idea of autonomy in that from their own perspective, like, why did you enjoy this activity? Well, because I got to choose what object to throw. And that made me more comfortable. And then I could work on my motor competence. Great. So that's part of the starting the conversation with these pre-service teachers? That was kind of a long answer.
No, that's great. That's great because that's really good information. So do you get any students that may have had bad experience or miseducative experiences, and like you said, reflect on it and learn from it and decide that that's not the type of teacher that they want to be? Because like when you were talking and you were saying what's your first memory that pops into your head about physical education, for me, very vividly, it was when I was probably in first grade, and I had hurt my foot. I like tore the nail off of my big toe because we were running around barefoot, and I probably kicked something I shouldn't have, and I tore that nail completely off of my foot. And I went to school, and I had this sandal.
That's because you were unsupervised, Corey.
Yeah, I know. And I told the physical education teacher, I told the PE coach, I hurt my foot, I can't run, because all we would do is run laps. And I told him I couldn't run. And he said, yeah, you can. And he forced me to like walk these laps. And the whole time I was limping, and I hated it. And I was like, oh, this is awful. And that's the first thing that pops into my head when I think about elementary PE.
Yeah. Well, and so if you self-reflect a little bit on that too. So how did that grade 1 kid forced to walk a lap with no toenail become the phys ed teacher you are now?
Right, exactly. So if I reflect on that moment, I could say, I do not want to be that physical education teacher, right? I don't want to be that teacher that forces my kid to do something that they aren't physically or emotionally ready to do. Yeah. So how do I become the teacher that isn't forcing my kids to do those things? And like you said, that meaningful PE framework is perfect for that.
Yeah, and that's a classic example of learning from a miseducative experience. Yeah. But if we don't take the time to reflect on it and think about it, and that can be in a formal way, like journaling or something, or just an informal way of, I do not want to be that teacher. Yeah. Right? But it's bringing it to the present. And, it's interesting. I used to do with my students when I taught more of the secondary phys ed specialists, because a lot of them come in as athletes. They're pretty physically competent. They're high jumpers, or they know what to, and they're hockey players or whatever. Yeah. And what I did to start that class is I literally taught the worst 45 minutes of phys ed of my life. And the first time I did it, I dressed in like a tight, property of U of A PE, shorts, headband, and I start the class off by yelling at everyone, saying, "Get in here, sit down." I call everyone by their last names, get them to the rows. I did, if you're familiar with the Hall of Shame articles, I did everything out of those Hall of Shame articles. And I did it for the first 45 minutes of class. But what I wanted to do that for is that some of the students hated it, but some of the students actually really enjoyed it because they were used to that and they could do well. And so that was an experience that we could share and then reflect back on, so that the students that were really good athletes can realize that, yeah, I don't mind running suicides because I can do that, right? Which is crazy that we even have a drill called suicide. But, yeah. But but then listening to some of the other students, and I had them reflect on it, and then we shared those with the class. And one guy, he said, when I was in junior high, he said, I was a fat kid. He goes, I jumped the lowest, I ran the slowest. And he said, when you stepped in the middle of that gym and blew your whistle and told us to get our asses into the center of the gym, he said, I started to sweat. But he said now, like as an adult, he got past that and he enjoys running and he loves being in shape. And he plays, I think he played ultimate Frisbee. And he was just like, but you took me right back to junior high.
Wow.
And so it was a really interesting process with those students. And the best, what I also use it for is university students can tend to be very structured. And well, you're the professor, you must know what you're talking about. And I try to get them to challenge thinking. So at the end of the class, what I did is I split them up into basketball teams. And I was extremely sexist and elitist when I did that. I basically said, okay, these are the best 10 players here. You're going to go on this side of the gym and play a game. You guys just figure it out over there. And then I spent my time reffing that game. When the one team won, I had the other team run suicides. And so the other players are sitting on the bench, and these guys are running their laps. And this one guy starts, like, and I said, he started cheering for them. And I looked at him and I said, "Don't you cheer for losers." And he looked at me like this, and he turned and he started clapping and cheering him on. Total opposition to authority, right?
Wow.
So I talked to him afterwards and I said, "What was going through your head?" Because I said, "That was awesome, because I was in the wrong. And you totally stood up to me. That was amazing." And he goes, "Well, I was just getting so mad." He said, "You were being such an asshole. I was going to be a bigger asshole."
That is awesome.
Yeah. So, I really think it's when we can provide some of these different types of experiences for our students and then bring them into a reflective place and they can think further on them. It's like I have a little thing that I need to do some research on this at some point, but my main goal with my phys ed pedagogy class is, number one, I want students to value phys ed in their own lives, as teachers, and in schools. So if I can get that value piece, then that's a win. The next piece is identity. If they can see themselves as a teacher of physical education, then that's a win. Only after those two things are in place, then I can get into good pedagogy. What does that look like? Because if they don't value it and they don't have an identity, they're never going to do it.
Yeah, that's so true. That's excellent. I love that. When you were talking, it made me think about, because you were talking about how these students were enjoying the experience, and even though it may have been, like you said, it wasn't differentiated. It was sort of old school PE, and you guys are going to do what I say because I said so type of thing. No meaning behind it, but they enjoyed it. And I think you're right. Like, we enjoy some of the things that we're used to, and if we get into a situation that we're used to and may have been comfortable with in the past, then we're more likely to have fun or enjoy that situation. But it might not be meaningful. So what is the difference between a meaningful experience versus an enjoyable experience?
I'm not sure that they're totally different. I mean, some of Scott Kretschmar's work around delight or joy, it's different than fun. And it's interesting that, kind of these 5 features in meaning are kind of surrounded or placed in a culture of delight or joy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, if an experience is enjoyable, I guess it depends. Was it just fun, or was there some deeper joy or delight in there? And not that everything has to get into this deep level. You can just go out and have fun, and that's okay. But if it's, like in our phys ed curriculum in Alberta here, like, fun is not an outcome in the curriculum. It's not in there.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's about learning. But fun is an important motivator to learning, and we know that. And so if it's embedded in there, so I think part of it is it's diving back into, so you had an experience, what was enjoyable about it? And so if I go back to that experience of, a very authoritative phys ed lesson that some kids thrived and enjoyed, to break that down and say, why would you say you enjoyed that? Well, they might end up saying, well, because I feel that my physicality is honored and recognized. So that's part of that increased motor competence, right? Mm-hmm. It's also relevant to them because they're good at this stuff. If you're a good basketball player and I ask you to play basketball, you can shine. And so it's breaking down that experience, and then vice versa for the student that just, no, this is bad. Well, why? Well, because I have negative memories. Maybe I was bullied because I couldn't jump 2'2" over a high jump bar. And so I lost social interaction, or the challenge was so hard that I couldn't do it. So I think when we break down that idea of why did I just enjoy this, that helps us to understand what's meaningful for us.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about, and I know this is more of like an athletics perspective, but I'm thinking about, when I was a high jumper, and some of the most meaningful moments, especially in my high school career, was when I failed. And I didn't live up to the expectation that I put on myself. And I went back and I tried harder and I worked out harder and I tried to fix those mistakes so that I wouldn't feel that disappointment anymore. And it's not when I was super successful that stick out in my mind, even to this day. And even talking about it, I could feel it, right? It's those times that I failed and that made me work harder in order to not feel that again. And that was a meaningful moment for me.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, one thing we don't do well is treating failure as meaningful.
Yeah.
And what can we learn out of, and what are we, failure could mean that the challenge is too hard.
Yeah.
But it could also mean, like you just said, that I'm not quite there. I need to tweak my training. I need to do something different because I know I can do that. I just didn't on this day.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because I see students, because it almost goes back to that cultural thing that we were talking about, where kids aren't experiencing these small failures in their everyday life. And so when a failure happens, it's almost hard for them to be able to deal with that failure. And I see it in class all the time. When a kid doesn't get what they expected that they should get, there's a breakdown.
Yeah, and I think some of that can go back to when you're always in an activity that is run by and supervised by adults.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get that opportunity to fail and learn from it. And I mean, certainly adults can construct that for kids. That's not what I'm saying. But when you have that opportunity to choose your challenge and fail, like I often use a kind of a skate park analogy for phys ed and for meaningful stuff, because when you go to the skate park, there's no trophies. There's mostly no parents, cheering from the sideline, yelling at their kid to, move the puck. It's kids out there trying stuff, and they're failing all the time because they're falling and they're landing and they're hurting themselves. But like I used to bike a lot at the skate park on my mountain bike. I was getting into kind of some trials riding and playing around, and I had to kind of make my space in the skate park with the skaters, because they didn't like bikers, but they certainly didn't like mountain bikers. And so, but that's where being 6'5" and 240 is helpful, because I just go,
just leave you alone.
So, but it's just interesting that culture that's there, and it's totally intrinsic.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is because, like, I'm not a big skateboarder. Like, I'm not very good at it. I have a longboard. I can longboard a little bit, but that feeling of competence and nailing something after you've fallen for so long, whether it's a kickflip or you're trying to get over a feature in the park or whatever it is,
mm-hmm.
That's where it's at. And, they don't need an adult to say, you did that wrong. You can do it this way. They know it doesn't work because I didn't land on my skateboard. I landed on my flat.
Exactly. And
one of the coolest things I've seen was, I'll try and keep it really short, but I was walking home from my son's school during, it was at about 9:00. And so school was started, and I walked past the local skate park by my house, and it was dead because all the kids are in school, except for these three, they looked like grade 10 girls to me, who were obviously skipping class, or maybe they had a spare. And fortunately I had my dog with me, because I didn't want to be that creepy old guy watching girls at the skate park, because that'd be really bad. But they were just they were not good skateboarders, but they were learning. And obviously to me, they were at the skate park then because nobody was there. Mm. And they were just trying to go down this little ramp, like not a big drop in half pipe or anything, just down a little ramp. And this girl tried like 3 times as I walked by and fell. And when she made it, like, her face lit up and her friends were cheering, and I was tearing up a little bit as I'm walking my dog, because it was just so cool. And just these 3 girls in the skate park. Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And it kind of reminds me of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book Flow. Yeah. And he talks about getting in this flow state, and that skateboard analogy. There's a really good TED Talk, and I forget the who does the TED Talk, but it's about just that, about this guy going out and trying to master some kickflip type of trick, that he tries and tries and tries, and he fails and fails and fails, and he finally gets it. And it was like this relief, like, I finally got it after all day trying this new trick. And I've been trying to figure out how I can create similar experiences in the class, where it's not, where the feedback isn't necessarily coming from me, but it's a natural feedback, and it's this autotelic experience where the kids are doing it just to do it. And so
Yeah.
it reminds me of the flow, and in the skate park, you have a clear goal, clear set goals, which is you're trying to land on the skateboard, right? Immediate feedback. If you fall off the skateboard, you didn't do it right. And then the challenge to skill ratio. You decide where that challenge to skill ratio is. So you have those elements of creating flow, and then it's just up to the student or the individual who's doing the activity to get in that flow state, right? So is this something that you sort of teach your students as well, like how to create these experiences in class where the feedback isn't always coming from the teacher, but it's naturally built in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I use those examples from Csikszentmihalyi High as well, and especially that skill challenge ratio that you mentioned, and that idea that if your challenge is here and your skill is here, that's the ultimate, because then you do this, right, and it bumps. And it's looking at, and there is no one way to set that up in your class, I don't think. Because it depends on the kids where they're at. It depends on your facilities, what you have. We are, unfortunately, in a society that is increasingly litigious, and we have, I think, fairly restrictive safety guidelines, which on one part I can see why they're there, on the other part it's too restrictive. So working within those constraints, I think a lot of the I'm blanking on self-determination theory.
Yeah.
With the autonomy relatedness and that sort of thing. If we look at that and help students become more autonomous and more self-directed, I think we can facilitate some of that. It's going to take time, though, because they haven't had that before, or most of them haven't. Some certainly have. But like I remember when you're teaching post-secondary here, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to throw out my whole syllabus. I mean, I have it all ready to go, but I'm going to have the students construct it. We're going to open this up. What do you want to learn? We're going to just, I'm going to give you 2 assignments. You decide the other 3. You decide when your due dates are. Let's just open this up. They hated it.
Yeah.
They absolutely hated it because it was too different from what they had. And so that was a key learning for me about, some appropriate scaffolding. And there is a time and place for teacher-directed learning in physical education, but it shouldn't be 90 or 100% of the time.
No, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And because, I'm in an IB school, and so we talk a lot about inquiry and teaching through inquiry. And some people's idea of teaching through inquiry is, like you said, just it's a free-for-all. Just what are you interested in? Let's go that direction, and if that doesn't work, we'll go a different direction, and it's just like wide open. But I think you're right. I think there needs to be some appropriate scaffolding, and I think there needs to be a direction for these experiences, or at least like a priming for these experiences. So if we're talking about community in my class, then in an experience where they're playing a tagging game, or they're playing a game with a small group, when we reflect on that game, we have talked about community and the importance of community and how to be a good member of a community. So when we're talking about reflecting on that game, we take it back to the community aspect, right? So they have the freedom, they have the autonomy to play within these small groups and in these sort of enclosed spaces, but we're always bringing it back to that particular concept or topic that we're talking about in PE.
Yeah, I think that's important to make those links and to provide that structure and scaffolding. And, there can be a time, I think, within that, having some choice and some autonomy to move, like your example from grade 1 of, you just ran laps all the time.
Yeah.
For some kids, they might actually enjoy that, because they might enjoy just the time to slowly jog around the track with a buddy. But, why not offer a selection of 4 different warm-ups? You can choose to go over this side and dance to this YouTube video for a warm-up. You can run laps with your friends if you want, and 2 more options, and just choose what your warm-up is today. Or even better, have the students in groups and have them take turns designing warm-ups for their classmates. Like, there's ways that we can embed these into what we do. And again, it comes back to the teacher being reflective and thoughtful about what happened. in the last class? What did I notice? And
Yeah.
sometimes we're stretched for time with that piece, but that, like, I've become a real big proponent of reflective practice. And, you know, a lot of times it seems like it's trite and just, well, just reflect on things. But when you do it in a bit of a formalized way and you look back on it and you think on it, it is super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's getting the kids to realize what they've done and think about what they've just experienced, and then um, putting meaning behind it, right? So even if it was an experience that they didn't enjoy or they didn't necessarily find fun, they can find some kind of meaning in that. And then when the conversation happens, when you've reflected on your experience and then you communicate that reflection to me, then we can start sort of co-constructing these experiences, so that next time maybe you could have an enjoyable time and I can have a more enjoyable time as a teacher.
Yeah. And I think that, like, taking the teacher reflection and also having that student reflection and interaction between the two. But, you know, teaching students to reflect on their behavior. And I know that's what, like, Steph Benny uses a lot of that with her students in terms of, you know, is very upfront. Here's some of the features. Here's, you know, what did you get out of this activity? And like Tim uses an example of slow pitch or softball, right? And often in phys ed, we feel a push from kind of that health side to go, if you have a 30-minute phys ed class, kids should be moderate to vigorously active for 29 of those 30 minutes,
Yeah.
right? But we're not a physical activity class. We're a physical education class. So
Right.
Where's the learning? And part of the thing with slow pitch or softball is that that's a sport that a lot of people will play after as in their adult lives. But it's also, people like it because of the social aspect. Right? The challenge is at a level they can handle, and they want the social. So why would we not facilitate that in our class and say, yeah, this is part of softball, is the social aspect, and or bring it back to the community, like you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I went and played golf today, and I'm terrible. I'm an awful golfer, completely awful. And me and a couple of the guys, we have a really nice golf course here in Coust, and I've started taking lessons because, again, I'm not very good, and I've never played golf before in my life. So I'm trying to figure out the game. And I probably lost, 4 or 5 balls. When I hit a ball, I never know where it's going to go. But it was fun because we were out there enjoying the beautiful weather, enjoying the beautiful golf course, and enjoying each other's company. And so for those reasons, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do it again, even though I know I'm never going to, see my name on the plaque of the golf club wall.
Yeah, exactly. And that's such an important piece, because every activity we do, it's not like you have to have all of these things in there, right? Sometimes we do things just because they're fun, and that's okay, and we can do that. And other times it's social, and sometimes it's a connection of the two. So, and golf is a prime example of something that, number one, it's something you can do for the rest of your life if you so choose. You're making a choice to be there. There's the social part. The challenge in golf is great because you're really working against yourself.
Well, that challenge ratio, though, for me, it's a little higher than I want it to be.
Yeah, but just play with the bigger golf ball.
Yeah, I wish I could, or bigger golf clubs or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something going on. But yeah, it's just looking at that and it's interesting you mentioned golf. I was going to throw some shade at Andy out here, but I won't be too bad for him. But my wife loves to golf. Like she kind of got hooked a few years ago, and she's taken lessons and she joined the league and she loves it. I don't mind golfing, but it's lower on my list of activities. But I love golfing with my wife because it's, same kind of thing. It's something we can do together. So It's that social interaction, and it helps build our relationship. And I do find a challenge in it because I can challenge, and, I like to go out and beat my wife at golf because she practices a lot and I don't. And it's fun. But it's not high on my list of things that I would pick to do right off the bat. But at the same time, there are valuable and meaningful things within that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you talk about, I know we've kind of talked about a lot of the features of meaningful PE, and one of them that we were talking about just now was the social interaction part. Could you talk about some of the features of meaningful PE and and how they kind of fit in and how we could make them fit into a physical education environment.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of shared some examples going around, and I do think being upfront with students in terms of, this is part of what, it may not be in your curriculum per se, but this is part of what we are learning in physical education, is the meaning, the cognitive side, the thoughtful side of physical activity and movement. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important too that, and I know on Twitter there, I am Sporticus uses an example of a stereo equalizer, mm-hmm. To look at different settings, and they don't, like, they do interact. Like if something is too hard, if the challenge is too hard, it's not going to be fun at all, and you're not going to find it joyful because you're not going to ever get in that state of flow. So I think it's constantly reflecting on your practice, being an observer of your own classes. I'm a big proponent of either getting someone else to come in and watch you teach and having that critical friend, mm-hmm. And a colleague. And like I'm part of. Good. You're frozen there for a second.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. I think that was my internet.
Oh, that's okay. I'm part of a peer teaching consulting group here on campus. And so we get requests. So I just did one last month for a nursing educator who is teaching epidemiological stats for nursing grad students. And I had no clue of the content, but I'm just in there to provide critical feedback to another teacher. Uh-huh. And we sit down and talk about it, and it's fabulous. And after doing a couple of those, I went to a close colleague of mine that I work with, and I said, why aren't we doing this for each other more often? Why aren't we in each other's classes? Because we have the luxury of doing that. Sometimes when you're in the school, you don't. So whether it's videoing yourself, because when we're teaching, it's hard to watch the students and really see what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And take something like dodgeball, right, which is a constant debate. Do we do dodgeball or not? But I just encourage my students when they go out on their practicum, I said, if your mentor teacher is doing dodgeball, what I want you to do at some point is just sit back and take note of all the kids. How many kids are really engaged? Look for that kid that stands almost at the back wall, but not quite, because they know if they stand at the back wall and they move their head, they're going to hit the wall. But they stand as far away from the ball as they can. They don't interact. They don't really dodge. They just kind of shuffle and move a little bit. Yeah. And, are all the kids, because everyone says, all the kids all love dodgeball. And I just kind of go, do they really though? Like, so if you never have that chance to step back, either with someone else or by videoing yourself. So I think that's a real important piece. And then talking to your students, whether it's exit slips or journals or just a conversation with, you pick a couple kids every day. How are you doing today? What's this, what are you feeling from this activity? How could it be better? I think that's some of the ways that we can begin to build this in. And I know, like in the research project that we're doing, we're now working with teachers in different schools and trying to figure out what does this look like. And I don't think it's a one size fits all. In fact, I know it's not a one size fits all. Mm-hmm. It's contextual, and it takes time. I think it's not like you can just lay this template over your class and go, okay, now it's full of meaning.
Yeah, right. But I was talking to Tim about that, and it seems though that even like with the aspects of flow and trying to get into a flow state, you can't necessarily force a kid to get in that flow state or find meaning to these activities, but you can create an environment that gives the opportunity for social interaction, for optimal levels of challenge, for fun, for improving their motor competency, for finding relevance in the learning and trying to find delight. Like you can offer those opportunities, and then it's up to the student to, if you've created this safe environment, right? If you've created this environment where these kids are going to thrive in, then they're more likely to find a meaningful experience in that type of environment.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with the, like you said, you can't just go, okay, be meaningful.
Right.
Like it doesn't
You
work
have
that
the
way.
opposite approach, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But if you take time to create a culture and you have an environment where, like we talked about earlier in the conversation about taking risks or being able to fail, when you have an environment where kids are okay to take acceptable risks and fail, and they're not going to get bullied or called out for that. It is that piece, and it's kind of like in some of the teaching games for understanding stuff too. Like you can't necessarily teach someone game sense right off the bat, but you can create an environment or you can create an activity in which, in order to be successful, they have to use some of that, or they have to think about it and develop it.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's that reflective process again, and really setting up that culture. And this is the way we do business here. In Mr. Gleddie's phys ed class, is that this is what we do.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you were saying about how you teach your students, and you want them to find value in what they do, and you want part of that identity to be a physical education teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they find value and if they find meaning in what they're doing, and they communicate that meaning to their students, then they're more likely to find meaning in the experiences that they're having in physical education class. Because I've seen too many teachers, sort of roll out the ball and not take their job seriously. And these are, highly regarded teachers, at least, where I used to work, highly regarded teachers, not taking their job seriously and rolling out the ball, and then wondering why they're dealing with, behavioral issues, or students skipping their classes, or even their job at risk of being cut, when they're not taking their job, when they're not valuing what they bring to the table, and their identity isn't anywhere close to being a physical education teacher.
Well, and it's interesting, like if we pull that out to broader education, no language arts teacher would get by with just saying, okay, everyone come into my class, just pull out a book. You're going to read for the whole time. That's all we do the whole year.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that being said, I know some language arts teachers who do that, but it's...
Yeah, I was thinking in high school, I actually had a teacher who did that.
Yeah, and but what boggles my mind sometimes too is with some like I know some elementary generalists who are fantastic teachers. Like their classrooms are, they're learning through inquiry, it's engaging, it's meaningful, and then they walk in the gym door and all that pedagogy stays in the classroom. And then they just roll out a ball. And part of that is, I think, is their perception of competence or comfort in the gym. But I've often said that, we always talk about issues in phys ed and what we have. And sometimes the biggest issue is us. Yeah. It's us as phys ed teachers, because we don't hold each other accountable. And, we were talking earlier about, people just tweeting and sharing, and it's all about what's the new activity, is it the tic-tac-toe relay? What is this? And new activities are great and they're fine.
But what awesome. Gets me though with some of these tweets is that somebody will tweet out a game and then the reply will be, "Oh, I'm using that tomorrow."
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean you're using that tomorrow? How do you just all of a sudden see something you like and then say, "I'm using it tomorrow"? What concept are you working on? What's going on, like in your class, that you can throw everything out and use it tomorrow? But
it is interesting. And I think there's an okay piece to that. You go to a conference and you want to pick up some stuff that you can use again on Monday, right? And that's okay. But again, if it doesn't come within a context and that culture and environment of where does this fit? What is the purpose and goal of your phys ed program?
Right.
Is it just to have fun new activities? Because that doesn't last.
Right, absolutely. And it's less likely that your kids are going to actually find true meaning and or these activities truly meaningful in a way that they're going to be affected by those activities or by that meaning in the future. Because I know we've had some studies come out recently that talk about the experiences that students have in middle school and in elementary, affecting the way they see physical activity, not just PE, but physical activity as a whole when they're adults. And we're a big part of that.
Yeah, and one of the key indicator, I know the one paper that came out that the media kind of picked up the negative aspect of it, which we have to acknowledge and own that as well.
Sure.
But buried in that paper was that the more you enjoy your phys ed class in school, the more likely you are to be physically active as an adult.
Yeah. And
so we can jump all over that, right? Like if we can really get to what I would almost call it a joyful phys ed experience. And it doesn't, joy is deeper than fun. It's not that you're just in there running around and, running amok kind of thing, or a meaningful physical education experience. I think we will see that difference. And, we don't have these longitudinal studies. I mean, it'd be fabulous to look at someone who had these phys ed experiences that were meaningful and then, check back in with them 30 years later and see where they're at compared to someone who had a more kind of old school phys ed experience. But, maybe we'll get there one day with these studies.
Yeah, maybe we'll get there one day. But I just think the work that you guys are doing, that you and the whole Meaningful PE team is absolutely amazing. And I think it's really, really valuable. And I think it's at this point in time something that all educators need to listen to, need to hear. And I want to do my best to be able to get this word out and get the information out so that teachers can start really thinking about the way they teach and start really thinking about their experiences in PE class. So I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you talking to us for, about an hour now. And I know we're getting to the end of the hour, so I do want to respect your time, and I want to leave you with the last word, any kind of message that you have for the PE teachers out there. And also, if somebody wanted to ask you a question or wanted to continue the conversation, let us know how they can reach you, how they can get a hold of you. And,
sure.
And yeah, I just want to, like I said, thank you again for coming on the show and leave you with the last word.
Okay. Yeah. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Jorge. I really, really appreciate it. It's fun to talk about this stuff, and you're a fun guy to talk to. Yeah, I think, so first of all, in terms of learning more, getting in touch, the one thing I really appreciated, and I got kind of brought on partway through this project and really appreciate working with Tim and Deirdre and Steph and the whole crew. But the thing that they did right from the start was to say, we want to make all this public as quick as we can. So the LAMP website, if you just Google Meaningful Physical Education, it'll come up. There's blogs on there. There's the research articles. There's pedagogical case studies. It's really, really good. And we're using that blog actually and the website with our research. And so, that's one way to get connected. I'm happy to chat with people anytime. I'm on Twitter. I think it's a very engaging Twitter handle of Doug_Gleddie. So it's pretty exciting. But I think, in terms of a last word or something like that, I think just being thoughtful educators, and that comes with reflection, but it comes with being lifelong learners. And I strive for that in my university teaching, and I don't always get there, because it's very alluring to just do what you've always done because it's simple and it doesn't take a lot of time. But it is really meaningful to push yourself and try some new things and reflect on what's going on. And, I honestly think being a physical education teacher is still one of the best jobs in the world, but we can't take it lightly. And, we are, you can't be part of the solution if you're not part of the problem. So we're all part of the problem, and we can all take steps to shift what we're doing.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And I will put links to the website and your Twitter handle as well. So if anybody wants to reach you, ask any questions, they can do that. So thanks a lot, and hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, Jorge.